And there's a lot of bats and machinery. The wildlife haven't evolved to machine. Do you follow that? So I thought we'd start with the pike, the dung pike. I think this is a nice little area here. Now, I know it looks like a bank of weeds, but if you look very closely, this is a vetch, the little black wild pea, very important for the smaller songbirds. Briar, very important for honeybees and wasps and pollinating insects. Thistle, very, very important. There's about maybe as many as 30 wild flowers there. The object is, when we come into the Wildlife Arboretum, we don't think about weeds, because this community has made a commitment to create a safe haven for all of the wild plants and weeds, including ragwort. Okay, ragwort is illegal under the Noxious Weeds Act, but here we encourage ragwort, because ragwort is the feeding plant of the cinnabar moth, a very, very rare nighttime moth. And because it's being removed everywhere from farmland across County Limerick, it's got to be allowed somewhere, or else we lose our beautifully coloured cinnabar. So I thought, here would be a nice place here for a wild apple. The limestone's very near the surface here. Limestone is like a giant storage heater. During the summer, you can feel the heat. I was working here in the summer, barefooted. You can feel the heat coming up from the limestone in August and July. And then in this time of the year, it gets very wet. Someone told me in the late 60s, when this quarry filled with water, the swallow holes were jammed from backfill of muds. A blue dye was placed in this quarry, and within 2 hours the blue dye occurred in the Shannon estuary. So it's very important what we put into this quarry. We're using no fertiliser whatsoever, we're using no insecticide, herbicide, fungus, no pesticide, because for some reason we're on a central water table artery in this quarry. So it's very important that we're very, very careful not to in any way pollute. Originally, the name of the project, thanks John, the name of the project was called the Restoration Ecology Project, which basically we're just trying to restore. I mean, the nature's already here, the bats are here, I have seen a visiting hare. The plan next is to bring in, to develop a pond, because wildlife need to drink as well. I've seen, Eamon Sexton and myself saw actually quite a rare damselfly here about mid-July. But these rare insects, they need water, and this is very dry in the summer. Very dry. The hare that came down that gully was coming looking for a drink, in fact.
Why haven't you put it in a pond?
Well,
a pond in our
we are going to put in a pond, most definitely. And seeing that a cup was won, Mary, we might get Senator Mary Jackman, my friend, on Limerick County Council, to contribute.
Yes,
Towards the pond. The pond is vital. All life began in water. We all start in the placental waters inside the mother. And all life came from water. We evolved from water. The human blood is made up of calcium, potassium and sodium in exact proportions to sea water. As Rachel Carson, the great ecologist, said, we have internalized the oceans. We come from sea water. There has to be water in any wildlife project, because everything needs to drink. Everything. Stoats, I've seen stoats here in the quarry, the indigenous stoat, and they like a little drink too. And we talk in terms of heritage. The stoat is part of our heritage. There is an old rat living in the quarry, but the rat is not indigenous. The rat didn't come naturally, it was brought by man. But still, there is an old grey rat actually living up there near by the road. But the rat has its place too, because the rat will clean up diseased shrews or field mice. We have 3 native field types of mice in Ireland. By native I mean they came, they weren't brought by man, they came of their own accord across Land's End when Land's End was part of Waterford before the oceans rose. When the oceans rose and the glaciers melted, Ireland became an island, but the rat never made it. It was brought by man. Still, we must try and discover its place. It has naturalised very, very well in this country. There again, none of us want to see the rat near our pantries, or understandably. The rat was associated with the Great Plague of the Middle Ages. And there we go. Basically what I'm doing here is I'm removing a little bit of the sod. It's called site preparation.
Hello.
When we're... Good morning.
Sorry for
Felipe. Okay, good morning. When you are site preparing, you must pay a particular attention to preparation of the site. So we're going to spend a lot of time on this, planting this wild apple to commemorate Eddie and Mary Noonan's wedding. And then after that we can all go freely planting, I feel. And we'll plant one for Lorraine Shanahan. Lorraine loved plants.
Treasure.
80% of the 17 million mature trees that were blown down that night in October 87, the research showed that 80% of the trees were badly planted 500 years ago. Very important to prepare the site appropriately, because we are working with stock from wild wood. These come from intact wild woods. We try and only introduce into this quarry true genetic stock from the first woodlands that came about 9,000 years ago. Do you follow that? To give the wildlife a break, basically. So today, or this site here, is going to be a wild apple. So you take away the upper sod. That must come away completely. Okay. Okay. Would have passed here, and the soil's very compacted. We are on limestone. As I say, the great Springfield Castle was cut from that wall. The great Norman Keep was cut from that wall in the late 1300s. Glenquin Castle was cut from that section. Most of the castles of West Limerick come from this quarry. The windows and doors of Killochilly-Han come from this quarry. It's a very valuable limestone. I see in Castletown Connors, whoever the landlord was up that country, his great cut stone monument, it states, I think, Hines Broadford. So the lords cut their burial stones from here. The plan is to mount a stone plaque in the quarry to commemorate Lord Musgrave's gift of this site to the school children of Broadford. Are we agreeable on that, Mary?
Yes.
We do want to commemorate. It's also this community's contribution to the peace process, the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, that we're not hung up with a now vanished Protestant Anglican gentry. We're not hung up in Broadford. We are ready to embrace all of the indigenous cultures of the countryside, and we're ready to acknowledge Musgrave's gift. They say in Broadford, he didn't give his best land to the school children. At least he tied up land forever for the school children of the village. That's what's important. Now, Seamus Heaney recently was saying in the north, Seamus Heaney was saying, he was asked who inspired him to write poetry, and he said Patrick Kavanagh, because Patrick Kavanagh in his poetry elevates stony grey soils of Monaghan and the uplands and the bog areas where the indigenous communities were hunted by Lord Mountjoy, Charles Blount, in 1601. And there was a shame associated with wilderness. There was a shame associated with bog and uplands. We've turned the full circle. The bogs and the uplands and the poor stony grey soils and exhausted quarries at this time represent the purest genetic reservoirs in Ireland. That's the irony. And of course, Heaney writes and praises the wild places. He only has little time for the fine, manicured, Dalicized, Disneyfied places. It's places like this that Bellamy loves to visit, that Peterkin loves to visit, and so forth. This is where it's all happening, John. It's not happening in Parkland in Springfield. It's happening in Glenveogue. It's happening in Glenduff. It's happening in Broadford Quarry. These is where wild beings incarnate. Wild beings. All creatures must come into bodies. I don't know why, where they come from, where we go after. We're obviously designed not to know these things. I'm quite happy to live on that understanding. And so at least to create a place for an intact place for wild beings. And this is intact. It's very, very intact place. For people to know that there is intact wilderness. Very, very important to know that nearby there's a place we can go where there is wilderness. We need wilderness. We need to know that there's a wild place nearby where we can go. 13% of Germany is under concrete and rising. So, under the Hitlerite regime, a lot of the rivers are straightened in Germany. And again, we've come the full circle. They're putting the meander back into the great rivers of Europe. Because if you interfere with the natural systems, really we interfere at our peril when we start playing around with natural systems. 95% of all preparations in a chemist are plant extracts. So what we're doing here is you leave stones in. Would someone say why we're leaving a lot of stones in this ground? You wouldn't be taking aeration, yes, aeration and drainage. And heat. This stone, this piece of limestone, which originates from the bones of the whales of an ancient Ireland. Limestone is the bones of fish. This stone still has the summer heat, but in 6 weeks' time this stone will be frozen. Soil is actually still quite warm. We're now mid-November, coming after full moon onto new moon. The best time of the year to plant is November. The best time of the year. In fact, I would say that there are 2 species you must plant in November, early December. That's the birch and the beech. They don't like the cold soils of March, February. We still have warmth in the soil, slow heat release from the summer sun.
What about
Now,
seeds? Seeds will...
Great time for seeds as well. There's still a little bit of warmth, Felipe. There's still a little bit of warmth in the soil.
So you mean more plants, trees, more than seeds. I just had I understood you were talking about.
Well, yes.
Seeds, what you're talking about.
Oh
trees,
yes, this is the
plants.
best time of the year in the west of Ireland. It's a quiet time. There's still heat in the soil. It's a very good time for tree planting. All year is a good time for tree planting. We all have cars. I don't have a car, but most people have cars. Cars every 12 months release 4 times their weight in carbons. So that anyone who drives a car is obliged to keep up the planting so that we're dealing with our carbons and so forth. And industry is coming big time into the country. And I'm very pleased with the development. Very, very pleased. The emigrant ships are no longer going out of the country. But we must keep something in mind, that the essence of all heritage is our wilderness. Now I'll take out that stone too. I would leave that stone. I'd leave that stone. Keep in mind as well, stones are made up of minerals. And the rain by its nature is acidic. The rain is about 6.7. And dropping in Europe. 1/3 of the European forest is dead because acidity has gone seriously up. So stones, by their nature, limestone is alkaline. It's the opposite to acid. When it rains, minerals are released. Important minerals. You just leave stones in the ground. That's the plant field. We're not introducing any artificial fertility here in the quarry. Because trees, because they're natural vegetation of Ireland, they don't need fertilisation. They take their main nutrients from the sunlight. Just look after the leaves and the needles of the conifers. Is the best way to feed a tree, is look after the leaves. Avoid firing or piling. Not good to compost near the roots of a tree. Heavy machinery, keep them away as well. Now, I also wanted to introduce, this is not intended as a fertiliser. Right, Mary? Okay, Mary. I'll see you Monday. There'll be a few of us here Monday doing a bit of work placement. Okay, Mary. Congratulations on the cup. Yeah. Congratulations. I'm absolutely thrilled that this quarry won the Limerick Cup for the best environmental project in the... This is peat-based, but it's certified that it comes from an ecologically and scientifically exhausted peat, Irish peat. On that basis, I couldn't find any proper compost for today's planting. So I bought this bag. I don't want to promote commercial names, that's not fair. Basically, it's Irish peat. I'm happy to use it to ameliorate or soften the soils that's going to receive this wild apple. We're on a very alkaline soil here. It's ordinary peat. As I say, it comes from a place of zero ecological importance. This is not a fertilizer. This is to help the tree settle in rapidly. When we go to sleep, we still grow. When trees are asleep in the autumn, there's still action in the timbers and in the root system. It doesn't completely get knocked out. So as soon as this tree steps in here, hopefully, just in the warmth of the November soils, it will actually root in before the -10 of the winter. And hopefully it'll be settled in and sleeping by the time the floods come. The quarries flood every December. Where we're standing now can be underwater for several days in December. Last year, no plant died under freezing water, on the basis, I argue, that they're all indigenous plants. They're all indigenous plants. They're able to survive and hold their breath. Even the yew trees that we planted here, you would always think could not survive water. But there wasn't a single loss. Now you'd mix in the medium. As I say, it's not a fertilizer. The object is not to feed the tree. We don't want the tree. We want the tree to discover for itself, to drop its roots well in its own effort to feed itself. Fine piece of stone. God knows how long ago that was cut out by man. Finely chiselled. In fact, very, very like a capstone over an arch. Beautiful. The place is full of very, very, very fine stone. Okay. Now, another good habit is to... That's great. Ah, no. Children are welcome. Oi. Children are welcome. Okay. It's them who's going to have to look after the woodland. It's a good idea and it's a good practice. Fork around. Just fork around. Encourage the roots. Spread out. Okay. And then Another good habit, folks, is to throw down something to take the soils out onto. There we are, Eddie. That's, it's in a nice, it's in a beautiful sunny position. South, it's in a beautiful sunny position. Sheltered, microclimate, there's no heavy winds get in here. It's great. We're about 25 foot down, maybe 30 foot in places. And it's a very, very nice place. If, Willie, you could just touch wood. Touch wood. Between our native wild yew. Some people were anxious about the colour. It has turned very, very deep in colour. That is what's called seasonal colouring. The yew can turn in its first winter or autumn in final position. In its second? No, its first winter. This is its first winter. It can turn a very deep green. And I'm not worried about it. I have seen dogs come into the quarry and they use this yew as a urinating post, which is a pity because plants cannot take dogs' urine. Dogs' urine is extremely toxic. And because this is a children's playground, and because of the toxoplasma, is it plasmotoxis? Does anyone know this disease in the country? Blindness in children from handling dog droppings or urine. We've got to keep dogs out. Dogs are not part and will never be part of our wilderness. They cannot be. They never came here. They were brought here. Their urine and droppings are toxic within a wildlife area. The smell of a dog will hunt the hares back to the mountain. The fox will be driven away by the smell of a dog. We want a place that's safe for all wild creatures, lichens, mosses, insects, bird life. The most colourful of all Europe's birds and the most melodious occur in the west of Ireland. We're blessed. We only have 26 native species, but we have some very beautiful trees. This is one of the trees. Nature was very good to Ireland. It gave us the Irish yew. It's a subspecies. There are 6 yew species in Ireland, and this is one of them. It's important for lots of reasons. I won't go into it, but definitely this is the tree we all need to plant, because 1/4 of our adult population are facing into chemotherapy, radiotherapy, brachytherapy and so forth. This tree releases a pollen that fights cancers, human cancers. Okay, this is another very, very fine tree, the arbutus. The arbutus. What's it doing in Ireland? No one knows. It doesn't occur in the temperate regions. I don't think it occurs in Britain in the wild. It occurs here in the wild. Portugal, Spain, well up into France it also occurs. That's a very beautiful tree. Big fruits, attracts birds, great cover, great ground cover. Evergreen, one of our 5 evergreens. So between the 2 evergreens and the holly there, of course, we've planted our 3rd evergreen, and Scots pine further up, and juniper is the 5th evergreen of Ireland. So it's going to, I believe it will be very... One other thing I wanted to show on the camera is always bruise the iron pan. There's an iron pan there from the shovel. There's an iron pan, a face on the soil. To encourage good roots, fork that iron pan. It's like a compaction, just fork it well. And there we are, Eddie and There we are, Eddie. I'm leaving the rest to yourself and Mary. I'm afraid I only have the one shovel at the moment.
Good share.
No harm bit of that. That's excellent. Good on you.
What's there's no stones in
Was it a good day, Eddie? Good lad. You look well. And have you moved into the town?
Mary digging.
And oh yeah. Oh wow. A flower looks quite nice. Absolutely beautiful. Beautiful. Oh well, they're very richly endowed in Mexico. We don't have a lot of colour in Irish nature, not so much colour. We have to go lay of colour. That's why ancient woodlands are the priority landscape under the European law in Ireland. Nice one. Nice one. Nice one. Did the camera catch that? Okay, that's great. Now, we're not just finished yet, lads. I'll just show you one other little thing here that we would do. Okay? Settle it in, get the air up, bring up the root collar, that's it. Now you wouldn't stamp it in yet, I've one other thing to do, and that is I wanted to the object of this, it's called a mulch. Firstly, when the waters rise from the Shannon, this place is very like a turlock. It doesn't take so much surface water, but the swallow holes, I've seen water come through the swallow holes into the quarry. This place regulates the water table. It's actually quite breakish or turlock like that way. And the plants could be lifted in the water. So the idea is to hold the plants, to anchor them for the first winter. It's called mulching. It also protects the tender roots from the first frost. It gives the tree a year to acclimatise to very alkaline soil, 7.3 to 7.5. That's very, very calcium here. You couldn't plant heathers here, or rhododendron, or azalea, or camellias, or any of the indicator plants of the acid soils. We're the opposite to the steeple. The steeple is a vast blanket bog, sadly coniferoised, despite it being a hen harrier habitat. Your mulch as well, when you invert, after inverting the sod, don't allow your mulch straight up to the plant. Avoid that. Do you understand that? Don't draw that up to the plant. It confuses the tree, and the tree will stop growing here and become a bush here, and we don't want a bush. We're trying to bring on, like a Care Pink, Golden Wonder, British Queen, Lumper. Every organism has a shape. We want to maximise the shape of every tree in the quarry. We don't want shrubs when they could be trees. We don't want trees coming out of shrubs. There's a juniper there. The first plant came to Ireland after the Ice Age. If that began to grow upright, I would get worried, because it has no genetic instruction manual for upright. Its job is to cover the ground and accumulate soils, build up of soils in an Ireland that had no soil 9,000 years ago. And it's at this stage then that you'd heel in. Now, Mrs. Mary McAleese, the president, and I recently were planting a tree, and she wanted to know, to what extent do you heel in the plant without knocking out too much oxygen? You'd know yourself. You'd know yourself. You'd feel it. You'd never plant on a very wet day because you'll squeeze out all the oxygen through the mud. You never work soil when it's frozen, not good. Because the millions of different species of life that make up soil go into a slight suspension. Like a bat will reduce its heartbeat to 8 per minute in the deep winter. And soil goes into a place, well, where do we go when we're asleep? Where do we go on the telephone? I don't know where we go under anesthesia. But soil goes into a suspension within itself. When you work with it, you disturb it. You kill soil when you work with it when it's frozen or very wet. You disturb the soil. And at the moment, soil erosion is very, very advanced in Ireland. Soil erosion is very advanced. Trees literally are holding our planet together. Nothing else is holding the earth in place like the trees are doing it. And then what I normally would do is I'd put a stick. Is there a little beech stick there? There it is. And does anyone know why I'd put this stick here? About there, I suppose. Is to highlight its presence. Is to highlight. It doesn't, I wouldn't stake the tree, it doesn't need staking. And no harm replacing a few stones as well. Remember, this is a children's playground as well. A lot of children come in here and play ball, recreate themselves. We all need that recreation in our life. Enjoying existence really is the challenge. It's very, very important that we have a good lifetime. And so at the same time, children are alerted. I'll put that down deeper. Children are alerted at the presence of a newly planted tree. Do you follow that? That's the object. It could go down another foot or two. I wouldn't tie the tree. That's very, very comfortable. I wouldn't water it in, there's enough moisture. But if this was late September or mid-July, you can plant anything that's growing in a pot. You can plant any time of the year. Watering in the plant is very good. It reduces stress. Plants go into stress when they're handled and planted. They actually get very stressed. So you reduce the stress by giving them a nice taste of water. It helps them settle. Do you follow that? And, okay.